You're watching the Channel 2 News Hour, Alaska's most watched newscast.
When you dial 911, you expect emergency services to show up at your house as fast as they possibly can. But the city says there are several confusing and even duplicate street names around Anchorage that may get in the way of a quick response.
The city has a list of more than 100 street names in Anchorage that could be confusing, and that the city's considering those changes to help first responders get it right. But the city kept that list private until today. Channel 2's Jason Lamb joins us live from Turnagain Parkway in West Anchorage with more about the so-called problem streets list. Jason?
Yeah, Mike, Maria, we are at Turnagain Parkway, and this is just one example of the problem because 2 blocks away from here is a Turnagain Street and even a Turnagain Boulevard. Now, it was a couple weeks back when we learned about a list that the city was keeping of problem street names like Turnagain that the city was considering changing. But it was only yesterday that we learned that that list was being kept private. There's a concern around these West Anchorage streets, an issue that revolves around drives, places, and circles. Everywhere you look on this corner, neighbors here have to deal with some pretty confusing road names. Here's the problem in this neighborhood. Back here is Hillcrest Circle. This is Hillcrest Place. And making things even more confusing, right over here is Hillcrest Drive. At the Anchorage Police Department, Chief Mark Muse says it's more than a little inconvenience when it comes to emergency response.
That potentially would go to the wrong place. And that's what we did in the Eagle River tragedy.
911, what's the emergency?
I've been shot.
That Eagle River tragedy took place back in 2002, where retired Public Safety Commissioner Glenn Godfrey and his wife lay bleeding to death after being shot in their Eagle River home.
Okay, ma'am, help is on the way. The ambulance is coming as fast as they can.
But emergency crews weren't fast enough. Glenn Godfrey died before help ever arrived. For a drive that should have taken less than 10 minutes, it took 49 minutes for an ambulance to find the Godfrey home because of confusion over 2 similarly named streets.
If you had a bunch of bluebirds right next to each other, Bluebird Court, Bluebird Circle, Bluebird Drive, and they all intersect each other, and particularly if they curve and bend so that they switch back and forth between north addressing and south addressing, it gets really confusing for humans and computers, and you don't want confusion in the middle of a life-threatening circumstance.
After the Godfrey incident, the city's addressing department began compiling a list of problem streets in Anchorage, street names that the city is considering changing to avoid that kind of confusion.
That could cause a real problem if you don't know where you are. Say you're visiting from out of town, or I don't know, maybe you're on Conscience or something along those lines. There's a big room for error trying to figure out where you're located.
Confusing or even duplicate street names are not uncommon in Anchorage. In the addressing department's most recent list, there are 112 streets identified as problem streets. Duplicate street names within the same community are first on the list to be changed. So, do you live on a problem street? The addressing department first told Channel 2 you'd have no way of knowing for sure until the city makes the decision to change the name.
No, we notify people when we get to that street name change. There's no sense in worrying anyone before it's necessary.
But if you're on the list, it may be a long time before the city gets to your street. Carlene is the only person working in her department. Since 2008, the department says it's changed only 11 street names. Remember, there are 112 on the problem list. But it might be fair to say then, I mean, if you're maybe not right at the top of that list, you could be waiting 3 years. You could be your name.
It could be longer even before we get to the number 6 priorities. You know, number 1 priorities obviously are going to be the first ones we want to get to.
So we asked the addressing department to release the full list to us. Is that a list that we can get a hold of?
No, it's for internal use only.
And why?
And that's just for our purposes. It's just a list that is maintained by our department or added to by the police and fire departments if they run across problem streets that they think need to be dealt with.
Wilson says there is a search engine on the addressing department's website where you can type in any address and any duplicates will show up. but it doesn't specifically say if the city has placed that duplicate on the problem streets list. So because of the public safety concerns about emergency response and problem street names, Channel 2 asked the higher-ups at City Hall for the complete list. And within a couple hours, we got it. This is a list of just some of the top priority problem streets in the city, many with duplicate or similar names. A list filled with the same kinds of street name issues that led, at least in part, to that Eagle River incident. A list that before today would have remained under wraps. And the city says it is important to keep in mind that the names of the streets on that list are those that could cause problems for emergency personnel, and that the city says it is currently evaluating to see if those street names need to be changed. Mike, Maria?
So, Jason, now that we're able to obtain this list from the city, where can people go to see it?
Well, we have the list on our website, ktuu.com, in our web article. It's actually an interactive map that you can click around in and zoom in on and take a look and see if your street name is one of those problem street names.
All right, thanks, Jason. Jason Lamb reporting tonight.